This is the lesson for first grade primary and secondary colors, and they are going to mix their own secondary colors. So what you're going to have them start with is they're each going to start with 3 pieces of cardstock. So these are just half sheets of cardstock that have just been cut in half, and they're going to mix their own secondary colors, and then you're going to let the paint dry. So this might be a 2-day project depending on how you do it with your class. If you had a chance to maybe do the painting before they went to lunch and came back after lunch, you could possibly get it done in 1 day. But I'm going to show you the steps to do first and then what you could come back and do the second day. This is the finished product for this lesson. So this is what they're going to be using the painted paper for, is to make the fruit for a still life. So that is what they're going to be making in the end. So, but first they have to have their secondary colors. And I found when working, especially with the younger kids, they have a really hard time if you give them a plate with multiple colors and then mixing the paint. They have a hard time just mixing the colors that are supposed to be mixed and not kind of ending up with a big mess. So this is a way that I found that works a little bit better, is instead each of these sheets is going to be one of the secondary colors, and you're just going to directly on the paper just give them the paint that they're going to use to cover the paper. So you're just going to put a drop of paint on each paper. So this one is going to be making purple, so you're going to give them some blue and red. You might want to experiment a little bit yourself before you go in, because sometimes different brands of paint, just depends how true the color is. Some of the brands of tempera, it works better if you use the magenta instead of the red, and if you use more of the turquoise. So you might want to experiment a little bit, but then again, they might get a little bit confused with what's a primary color. So I just have straight red, yellow, and blue. And then what they're going to do is they're just going to mix this right on the paper to get purple, and then just spread it out. And they want to just fill the whole paper with paint. And it just makes it really easy. They don't have to worry about mixing the colors with other colors, and then they get a nice color, and they're able to have all the secondary colors separately. Whoop. So, and I also like that it gives, the paper kind of has a little bit of variation in the color just from mixing it, and it gives it a cool effect when they start cutting them out. So then just have them rinse their brush and do the next one. So you could decide how you wanted to set this up in your class, whether you wanted to give them all 3, you could just give them all 3 sheets of paper with the colors already on it. Like this, you could just give them the papers already ready to go like that. So they're just already on their desk, and then they just take their brush and mix each one. They just need to remember to rinse their brush in between. And then just encourage them to mix it up really well, and then fill in the page. And if they don't have quite enough paint to fill in the entire page, that's fine. Just have them fill in as much of the paper as the paint gets. This is just so much easier this way than mixing on a plate and then transferring the paint over to the paper. It goes really quickly, and it's hard for them to mess up. Okay, so now that you have all of your secondary colors, and these just need to dry for a little bit. So we'll just set those aside and let those dry. So the next thing that you can go ahead and get ready on the first day or before the paint is dried is now they can make the background for the fruit to sit on. So the idea is they need a background color, and then this will be the table. So they're gonna get a full sheet of colored construction paper and a half sheet. And this one's gonna just be glued on right here, and it's gonna act as the table. So I would just give them, you could just lay out various colors and let them choose what they want for their background and what they want for their table color. And then the table color, you just need to have them glue it on. And a glue stick works fine for this project. So here's my table and the background. And then now you can use crayons. Crayons work fine, or oil pastels. It's up to you and what you have. I love using the oil pastels just because their color is so bright and vibrant. But like I said, crayons work fine too. So encourage them to do a pattern. Think of like a tablecloth and a pattern that might be there, and then maybe a pattern on the wall, what, you know, wallpaper or paint or something like that. So have them draw those patterns for their background. So I've got my background done. This will make my table and then the background. And one thing that I like to remind them, sometimes when you kind of give them free rein to do patterns, something like this, you do need to give them a reminder, no words, no pictures, no people, no animals. They're just doing patterns. Sometimes I forget to tell them that, and I find, you know, they've written go 49ers, go Raiders, whatever on the back of their paper. So try to remind them to do that. So you can do all this in the first day, and then in the second day, or just later that day when the paint's dried, you can complete the project. So now I have the papers that we painted, that we mixed, where we mixed the primary colors into secondary colors. So my secondary colors are dry. So now what they're going to do is they're going to cut the fruit shapes for their still life. So the great thing about fruit shapes is they don't have to be perfect, and it's a lot of circles. So there's nothing complicated where they are going to feel like they need to draw those out. I would just encourage them to make different size circle type shapes. So think oranges, apples, grapes, and just cut those out. So they should just be able to cut them out. You'll have some students that is a little bit challenging for, and if they need to draw the circle first, they could draw the circle on the back of the paper and then cut it out. Just encourage them not to draw on the paint side of the paper. And like I said, the shapes do not have to be perfect. In fact, most apples, oranges, although they're not perfectly round shapes. So if they're kind of a little bit off, then that just makes them look more real. Now I've got all my shapes cut out for my fruit, and now they just need to be glued on. So I would have the students kind of arrange them how they think they want them, just to get a general idea of where they're all gonna go. And then they can, and also they might have a tendency to want to put them on top of the line of the table, but instead they're gonna go on top of the tablecloth of the pattern. So they're going to use this whole area. So sometimes they have a little bit of a tricky time understanding that kind of that depth of how the painting works. Now I've glued on all the fruit, and you can just stop here if you want. This is fine. If you want to, as a final step, you can have them just really carefully trace the outline, the outer edge of the fruit. And this kind of helps the fruit to pop off the page more, especially if you have a real bold pattern like I have here on the table. It helps the fruit to just show up a little bit more. So they would just quickly and carefully add the outer edge to the fruit. And they could also add, you know, kind of some divots you know, or stems on the fruit if they wanted as well, to give it a little bit more dimension. Now I used a glue stick to glue these on, and it does have a harder time sticking on these. The paper is heavier, so this might be a great time to get out the glue cups and the glue brushes. That glue would hold on these shapes a little bit better. So this is the finished product for the first grade primary and secondary colors still life.